Hi, everybody. Welcome to Friends Talk Money. I'm Pam Kruger, co-host of Money Track on public television and founder of WealthRamp.com.
I'm Richard Eisenberg, a personal finance writer and editor, and formerly the editor of the Money and Work channels for the PBS site for people over 50, nextavenue.org.
And I'm Terry Savage, nationally syndicated personal finance columnist and the author of The Savage Truth on Money.
We're three friends who like to talk money and all the issues that come with it.
On this podcast, we're trying to help you understand your personal finances
to get you and your retirement on the right path for true financial peace of mind.
Today we're going to talk about one of the biggest financial challenges for people over 65, the high cost of prescription drugs and what you can do to lower your medication costs. I saw a survey by KFF Health Research Firm recently. It found that 11% of Medicare beneficiaries said that they either delayed or they went without their prescription drugs in the previous year because of cost. Figuring out the best price can be hard, but we've got some ways to do it. Before we share them, I'm curious, Terry and Pam, you have any thoughts about prescription drug costs and Medicare? Terry, do you want to start?
I never thought about it until I finally, last year, was given a prescription drug. Before that was Tylenol, and I always had, now this is really important, people always, when you sign up for Medicare, you have to sign up for Part D, the prescription drug program. It didn't matter to me. It was $11 or $12 a month, and I kept putting in, no drugs, no drugs, no drugs. So all of a sudden, I had to go on the website and go, well, this is what I now have 25 milligrams of. And so I had to look and see which Part D drug finder on Medicare.gov, what would be the monthly cost and so on and so forth. It was one drug and it really didn't add much to my monthly cost. And it was a really easy thing. It wasn't until a friend of mine who was from Canada and had to get a drug that was prescribed to him by a doctor down here that I went to a pharmacy drugstore that you all know. And I went, $120 dollars for this little thing? Well, we have our Walgreens drug card. Oh, I said, no, I had this Walgreens drug card because I'd shopped there. Well, that'll reduce it. It'll only be but $38 and something cents. And then don't ask me where this came from, something I'd written. I said, well, do you have this good RX plan? He said, well, yeah, look on your app. And I was going to really stand in line in front of all those people and download the app. He said, oh, you're probably a little old lady. I'll do it on my good RX app. That'll be $6.90. You're going to blow me up.
Yeah.
It's not until you start taking some drugs that you realize it's insane. So that's as much as I know. But I'll tell you later a story about my brother this morning who called me and said something. Go ahead,
Pam.
Okay. What I like about these discount cards is that there's no enrollment fee. You can't be excluded. So that's really good. But my one word for the overall category of figuring out, you've just been prescribed a drug from your doctor and he hands you the prescription, and your job now is to go figure out how you can afford to get it, especially if it's a super expensive drug, like $1,200 drug. So between Medicare Part D and the premiums for the prescription drug coverage going up, according to a report from HealthView, the cost of the average premium is going to go up this year between 42 and 57%. That's this year, 2024, compared to last year. And that's, obviously if you're over 65 and you're on Medicare, then you consider that you're paying for the drugs themselves. Now, something like 7.5 million Americans are, just like what you just said, are not able to afford to pay that price. So the one word that comes to mind that I hope we're going to kind of help clear up about what to do is confusing. I mean, just trying to figure out how to chase the best prices on these expensive drugs and what insurance covers, premiums, all of that, the whole conundrum, confusing.
It is confusing. So let's try to make it a little less confusing. And why don't we start by talking about the first rule to keep prescription costs down on Medicare? That's getting a good Medicare Part D prescription drug plan. It's not the end of it, but it's the way to start. And plans can vary a lot. Terry, do you have any thoughts about what people should know about getting a good Medicare Part D plan?
Yes, I think the government doesn't do a lot of stuff great on their websites, but the Medicare Part D Drug Finder comparison tool at medicare.gov is the one and only way I know that you can compare. So what you have to do is line up all your prescription. I mean, I wrote this for years until I wound up doing it myself. Line up all your prescription bottles. Make sure you have the correct name and the daily dosage or twice daily dosage. You put all of that in there and click. And it will give you the 3 or 4 lowest cost drug plans in your area. You might find you save money by buying a 90-day supply by mail order, but maybe you need or want to go to the pharmacy near you. So that's important too. And there are all kinds of ways to compare them. And what's worse is every year they change this great word, formularies, what they're going to pay for each kind of drug. You know, there's been all this talk about Medicare negotiating with the drug manufacturers. It's all political football for a year or two. I have no idea what goes on behind the scenes, but honestly, I didn't realize how much. I should have bought the drug companies years ago. I mean, those stocks have soared recently because of the weight loss drugs, but there's a lot of money in the pharmaceutical industry, and Medicare is dealing with the prices it can get, and the different drug plans categorize how much it will cost you. And the only way to do it through the Part D drug plan without any other cards or going elsewhere, which we'll talk about, is medicare.gov Part D drug finder.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, we'll get to the cards and a few other things in a second. I wrote an article about this whole topic for fortune.com about how to save on prescriptions when you're on Medicare. And one of the experts I talked to was a woman named Diane Archer. She's the president of something called Just Care USA. It's a digital hub for older Americans' health and money. She's really smart about this.
It's great.
She said a Part D plan might have a great price for one of your medications, but not for another one, depending on its price list, the formulary that Terry was just talking about. Here's what Diane said.
Every Part D insurer charges different copays for different drugs and has different drugs on its formulary.
Now, she said you could just use your Part D coverage to pay for your medications, but
it's just that it might cost you a lot more.
That's because sometimes you can get the best price at the drugstore using your Medicare Part D plan, but sometimes the price is lower if you don't use your insurance and you pay for your medications without it. That's why it's always worth asking your pharmacist for the price either way. Now, one way you might be able to save on prescriptions at drugstores is by using what we were talking about before, the discount prescription card, like the one that Terry was talking about before. Do you want to talk a little bit about how these work, Terry, or want me to?
Well, Richard, I was surprised. As I said, this hadn't been an issue for me. But let's name it Walgreens. They sent me a card and I shoved it in my purse pocket and thought, well, if I ever need it. And but so it reduced the price. So I thought, oh, well, that's great. It's a good thing I always go here. But then, as I said, I had heard about this Good RX, and that reduced the price significantly more. So you wrote the column. I was shocked.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
not all
I
the
found that
cards
too.
are alike.
GoodRx is one of them. It's Single Care is another. Actually, there are more than 12 different cards out there. And as Pam said before, they're free or they're inexpensive. You can get them as a downloadable app. They can save you sometimes as much as 80% on some prescriptions, especially generics. But because there are so many of these cards and they're all different, according to the experts who reviewed them, none of the cards will give you the lowest prices on all your prescriptions all the time. So you can't say, well, this card is what I'm always going to use.
Yeah.
You always want to compare the card with the current price with your Part D plan before buying a prescription. And one downside with using these cards is if you do use one, because you're not using your insurance, the price that you're going to pay for the medication with the card is not going to reduce your Part D deductible, and it may not count toward your out-of-pocket limit with your plan. So you keep that in mind. Pam, anything else you want to say about these?
Yeah, I want to tell you a couple of things I like, a couple of things that, you kind of talk about the pros and cons a little bit. There are more pros for me than there are cons. Again, you're not going to be excluded, so you don't have to go through some process to be accepted in any way at all. It's super easy and fast to set these cards up online. once you're registered and you're in the system, you can easily search through their website. And I'm talking about the discount cards website. And you can see which local pharmacy has the best price for that specific drug that you are shopping for. Then you call your doctor and, you know, let him or her know which location, which pharmacy. And I like the fact that at the checkout counter, you know, like Terry said, you don't want to hold up the line. You just flash your card, show the card. There's no deep thought that, you know, how sometimes when you're at the checkout and you're standing behind somebody and you get behind that person who, oh, let me call and research this. They're not going to do any of that. So there's no deep thought, delay. You're in and you are out. So ease of use is really fantastic. Like you said, Richard, I found that there are some drugs that you're going to get the discount up to 85%. So those are obvious perks. Now, what's not so great is their prices, not only on different drugs at different times that they don't cover, but their prices are all over the map and they fluctuate. They change all the time. So the same drug that you looked at last week that was on there that looked pretty good, but you didn't pull the trigger, might be a different price later. It's like a constantly moving target, and that can be frustrating. And then, you know, as mentioned, you know, not all drugs are going to be covered. So as much as it's ease of use, it's a ton of fact checking alongside those other things that you have to compare. And it feels to me like we're going to see more of these cards and not fewer, which just means more permutations and more research. Is the research
Ridiculous.
worth it? Yeah, probably is. But
Well, it is worth it, but it's ridiculous that this is, I mean, free enterprises. Oh, well, never mind. Don't get me off on that. You're going to talk about the drug companies themselves.
Yeah, so there are other ways that you can save too. So one way is see if you qualify for the drug company's patient assistance program, or PAP, from the company that makes the drug. If you do, the drug might be free or substantially less than its normal price. Now, I'll tell you that it's hard to qualify for these. They tend to be very limited in who they'll allow to get these discounts.
I actually did it with my EpiPen. That's how I got my EpiPen. And
Tell us how to
that's a $1,200 2 for 2, you know, price tag. So
you know what I heard this morning, by purest coincidence, my brother's birthday. They were taping this, and we were talking this morning, and I'm going to name the drug, okay? Trilogy, which is an inhaler or a broncho with pulmonary. And so he said to me, my brother's the biggest bargain hunter in the world. I could save a lot of money if I let him shop for everything for me. So he found out that once he had spent $600, which he did in January and February on that particular drug, he could go to the manufacturer. I don't even know who makes it, but I've seen the commercials. And he qualified for, I think it's a humongously reduced price. I'm not sure it's free, but humongously reduced price. So he's retired and not a lot of income. That made a big difference. So it might be that you don't qualify. I didn't know this until today. If you don't qualify for it right away immediately, check the drug plan, the manufacturer anyway, to see at what point, after having spent enough annually on their drug, you might qualify for a huge discount.
If you don't ask, you don't get. And I'm telling you, when I did this with my EpiPen, I had zero expectation. I was almost laughing when I did it. Like, well, this is never going to happen. And then I get this thing back that says, congratulations, you've been approved. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, it's always worth trying. Nothing to lose to check out the company's website and see whether you might qualify. And as Terry says, if not this time, maybe the next time. Now, there are other plans that are similar to this that are offered by states. So your state might have a pharmaceutical assistance program where you live, and they will help pay for prescription drug costs for people with limited financial resources. When I was doing my reporting for this article for Fortune, I came across this website called Needy Meds, NEDDYMEDS, Needy Meds. It's a great resource with information about all these prescription drug discount programs from drug companies and from states. So I would suggest you check out that site. You might even save money using Mark Cuban's Cost Plus drug company. Terry, you want to say anything about Mark Cuban, the guy everybody is from Shark Tank?
what a guy. Okay, here's a billionaire, you see him on Shark Tank and owns the sports teams and everything, who decided to apply the brilliant brain that made him a billionaire to this problem. And he teamed up with a physician, as I understand his story, and it's all over. Just actually go online and Google cost plus drug, or go to their website, costplusdrugs.com. Is it drug plural.com? I'll have to check. Anyway, costplusdrug.com. And he said, the way he describes it is, everybody else who's tried to come up with lower cost drugs worked through the system, started at the list price that the pharmaceutical companies charge. He said they built an entirely new system. They take the actual cost, which they as a big buyer can buy it from the drug manufacturer, add 15% plus a $3 handling fee to mail it to you. And that's, I think it's maybe $5 for mailing too. And that's it. And the savings are enormous. And they started out with some generic drugs that they could easily do. And they've grown to thousands and thousands of drugs. And I mean, I'm going to look right now. Hold on one second, because I want to make sure I give you the exact. It's costplusdrugs, plural.com.
Right. And it's mostly
You should
generics.
start there.
Yep.
Mostly
And then-
generics. Yeah.
Mostly generics. The question is, almost everything has a generic
Yeah.
these days. And I mean, your other choice is to go to Canada. And I know people who do. There's a whole huge philosophical debate about, well, the pharmaceutical, I'm not a free enterprise person. The pharmaceutical companies need the profits to justify the R&D. That's why we protect them for a number of years until the medicine can become generic. And if you didn't let them make these big profits, they wouldn't spend their time inventing, creating new drugs. I don't want to get into that with you. I'm just looking at people who are older and who cannot afford to buy food and drugs. And there are.
And don't give a rat's you know what about the pharmaceutical profits.
So
Right.
exactly. So somewhere in between, and not to mention that once they become generic, there are a lot of them are manufactured offshore, and even in China. But the point is, we hope the drug standards are such that you're getting the real medicine at a lower price, and that the huge increase, the huge spread of profits has come down, at least for people who are elderly,
Yeah.
and Medicare and need it. And this, by the way, probably the same thing. If you have, before someone yells, if you have a young child that has a condition that requires expensive meds, same thing. We shouldn't be paying that kind of fortune for drugs that are necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me also kind of tack on where you were going, Richard, with getting help and guidance to kind of navigate through these things. The website you mentioned is fantastic, and talks about the state health insurance assisted program. Just the acronym is SHIP. And I'll put the websites in the show notes, but shiphealth.org is the organization where you can go and you're going to get unbiased health insurance, overall counseling, especially when it comes to these prescriptions. And believe it or not, these counselors are actually highly trained and they're certified, so they can kind of help guide you through prescription drug coverage and Medicare at the same time, and even supplements and even long-term care insurance. By the way, I have to tell you something funny. When I was at Costco the other day, I decided to get a second pair of glasses, and they have an optometrist there. So I said, why not? So I went in, they had all the state-of-the-art equipment, deep discount. And their whole thing with the discount card and everything that they're doing and offering is, the woman said to me, I think pretty soon Costco's going to offer discount funerals. So discount funeral services from Costco. So stay tuned.
Yeah.
I'll keep you posted on that, because
Only a matter of time,
what
right?
we're trying to do is help us all have a life in retirement that's better and cheaper too.
Right. Do you all know, by the way, that when we refer to our show notes, if you go to our website, friendstalkmoney.com,
.org.
friendstalkmoney.org, that we post all these episodes, and we post links to columns Richard or I have written, or websites that we mention in the show, friendstalkmoney.org, and you can see all those links we mentioned.
I want to mention one other way people can save on prescriptions, and it's through the loyalty programs that a lot of the big pharmacy chains have, like CVS, Rite Aid, and Walgreens. These programs are usually free or they're inexpensive, And sometimes they've got premium versions, they cost a little bit more, but you get bigger savings. So if you go to the same drugstore chain store all the time, you may get a deal on your prescription drugs because you're a good customer there. Before we close up, Terry, any other advice you might want to have on saving prescriptions?
Just to follow up on what you just said, but don't assume that they're affiliated, you know, are you a good CVS or you're a good Walgreens customer card is going to be the least expensive. Don't
Right.
assume that, because it's what I did the last time.
Yep.
This is a terrible guessing game,
Mhm.
particularly as it revolves around what Part D covers and when you have to pay. As soon as I finish tackling Social Security, and as soon as I finish crusading against these Medicare Advantage plans that are going to restrict your care, if I have enough time in my life left, I'll go after the drug companies.
Okay, well, we look
Terrible.
forward to
In your
that too.
spare time, we look
Yeah.
forward to that.
One other tip I'll mention that I came across as I was reporting my piece was that sometimes you can save on prescriptions by getting a longer term prescription. So
Yeah.
ask about a 3-month or 6-month supply instead of 1 month, and also ask about whether mail order might be less expensive. It may be, it may not be. You may save money by getting a longer duration. You may not, but it doesn't hurt to ask. So that's a lot to take in, but it's a complicated system. I hope these tips have been helpful and you can keep your drug costs down. Thanks for joining us today. Bye.
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 Friends Talk Money is funded in part by a grant from the Investor Protection Trust. The IPT is a nonprofit organization devoted to investor education. Since 1993, the IPT has worked with the states to provide the independent, objective investor education needed by all Americans to make informed investment decisions. Visit investorprotection.org. We also receive support from the North American Securities Administrators Association, known as NASA. It's the oldest international investor protection organization. NASA's members include state and provincial securities regulators from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico who serve on the front lines of investor protection. Recognizing that education and awareness are powerful tools in the fight against investment fraud, NASA is pleased to sponsor Friends Talk Money. Here are 3 important tips to help you protect your money from fraud. With investing, there are always risks, so be cautious of anybody telling you that a certain investment is guaranteed. You should also proceed with caution if somebody is promising very large investment returns. This is a common red flag for investment fraud. Last and most importantly, be sure you're working with a licensed or registered financial professional. You can check your advisor and make sure they're licensed by visiting brokercheck.finra.org. NASA is your partner in keeping you safe and helping you avoid investment frauds. Visit nasa.org and click on the Investor Education tab to learn more.